We now have a real treat for you. Prior to our panel today, we have a speaker from one of our amazing sponsors. Marie Blistan has served as the president of the New Jersey Education Association for the past 4 years. Marie is a high school special education resource center teacher in Washington Township Public Schools. She previously served as NJEA's vice president from 2013 to 2017 and secretary-treasurer from 2009 to 2013. She will serve until August 31st, 2021. Other than all of this, Marie has been a longtime supporter and a partner of New Jersey PTA. She is even a life member of the New Jersey PTA. Please join me in a warm welcome for the president of the NJEA, Marie Blistan.
Oh, Kathy, thank you so very much. Thank all of you. I am a big supporter of PTA, as you know, and have been a member, and it's an honor to say that I am a life member, so thank you for that. Well, listen, let's talk about PTO and let's talk about our previous relationship and words that we use like collaborative and partnership. And then let's take a look at this past year, because I think we have redefined what that means and what that looks like all the way around. In fact, I would venture to say that our partnership and collaboration was on steroids over the course of this year. You, our parents, became and got a firsthand view, I think, of being assistants in our classrooms, even on our buses or in our cafeterias, in our playgrounds, in our hallways. You became tutors. You became even students, whether it was in kindergarten, clear up through 12th grade. Many of you either participated in our lessons or our activities, or you viewed them first because you had to learn it as well so that you could truly work with your students at home. And I know that you juggled both your own work lives, your own being home, not working, your own being a parent, then working as an assistant and or tutor again with your students in education. And we are truly grateful for that partnership and that collaboration. I've talked to my members across the state from what I say Sussex County all the way down to Cape May, and inevitably 100% across the board, our members have said nothing but accolades about the support that they received from you in our homes and in our communities. I would venture to say that we've talked about over the last year, the heroes, of course, the first responders and our health folks, but you, our parents, our grandparents, in many cases, our big brothers and sisters at home, you were also unsung heroes. And I want you to know that NJEA knows that and recognizes you for that. And let's put that into the context. There was no playbook. And I think I said that last year at the convention. No one, I don't think, expected that this was going to happen in our lifetimes. And it did. And we were in the most densely populated state in the United States, surrounded by New York and, of course, Philadelphia. And as bad as things were and are, we all know that it could have been much worse. And it was only because we did have true collaboration and true leadership with our elected officials that we hold accountable, and that you and I, all of us, have worked together to move forward. And I also want to commend you for also being the true partners with us when we asked for help and we asked to build a coalition of stakeholders back in the fall, when we started to hear and see that we actually were going to see a vaccine and we are going to get to the other side of the tunnel with this pandemic. I reached out to your leadership, Kathy, and asked would she be interested in working with us to form a coalition of a lot of stakeholders, sometimes people that we didn't always think about originally with education, and talk about what the priority needs are of our students and see if we couldn't actually get to a point where we could identify where those priority student needs were. And you know that, of course, Kathy, she stepped right up. She was an integral part of the leadership to talk about what that coalition was going to look like and what the results were. And back in February, you might remember, we released a joint statement with Kathy, with the administrators, with school boards, with activists around the state, with NAACP, with the Latino Institute, with so many others I can't even list. I think there's 19 people, groups that signed on, including legislators who joined us, at least in our meetings, and have met with us, by the way, since then. And because we've met with them as a group, asking them to come to all of us as we move forward. And of course, now that we have the money thrust upon us, the ARP money, unprecedented, we have again reconvened that coalition and just finished a paper that I think, Kathy, you'll confirm this. I think this next week we're going to be able to release it publicly, where we are modeling what that collaboration must look like in each of the districts as we identify the needs, priority needs of our students, but also where and how that money could be spent. And so when I look forward, I know that the questions that we can ask ourselves, of course, are, do we have a blueprint, and do we have a book, a playbook as we move forward? And I believe that answer is yes. And it's yes because we can identify what worked during this last year. We can identify what we need to do better, what we must do better. And we can also identify the how. And it's that how, to me, that is the most fundamental and the question that we all must make sure that we are dedicated to. Because on that collaboration, as we move forward with the funding from the state that will go through with our state budget, with the funding that is coming into our state from the federal government, which has actually a 3-year window, that we must sit down, have frequent communication, sitting down at the same table, parents, educators, the administrators, the school board, our community members, and our activists, and identifying how and where that money is spent. And I believe we have that common ground. I've seen it over the course of this year. When we came together to discuss what student needs were, there was common ground. It gets back to me, to the basics and the basis of why we have PTO, parent teacher organization. It's really more than teachers. We know that. It's our aides, our bus drivers, all of our education professionals that work in our buildings, including, of course, our administrators, but it's also our community. So I'll just end by saying I can't emphasize enough to you, PTA, the leadership that has been exemplified by your current leaders and your past. Kathy Lindenbaum has just been phenomenal, doing an exceptional amount of time and work. But Rosa Sarah is still there. She does the same. And I know that Rob is incoming and he attends as well. And I applaud you, this organization, and it truly is an honor for me to be able to address you live before we get to this panel discussion. So thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm Yvonne Johnson, and I'm the Vice President of Advocacy for National PTA, and I am super excited today to be here to moderate this panel for the New Jersey PTA. Today, we're going to be we're going to be asking questions about the digital divide, and obviously the number one thing that has been on parents' minds and, of course, educators is the safe reopening of our schools. Today, we really want to hear from our panelists. We have some amazing questions to talk about, ways that both families and educators can get involved and have a seat at the table, because if you're not at the table, you don't have a voice. Just a little bit about myself. As I said, I'm the Vice President of Advocacy for National PTA. I was the State President of Delaware PTA. I've served in multiple roles at both the state and national level. And now I'm going to introduce our panelists, and I'm going to start with Marie Blistan, who is the NJEA President. Marie?
Thank you, Yvonne. Hi, everyone. I'm most honored to be here on this panel and gives me an opportunity during Teacher Appreciation Week to thank our parents and our community members for the constant support that you have given to us. I am a special education teacher or teacher of students in special education for most of my career, last 20 in Washington Township and Gloucester County, but I'm also very and equally as proud to be the president of the New Jersey Education Association.
Thank you, Marie. And now I'm going to introduce Angel Santiago, who is the 2021 New Jersey State Teacher of the Year. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be on this discussion. Like you said before, my name is Angel Santiago. I'm a fifth grade teacher, first and foremost, out of Lauren Fleming Elementary School in Gloucester Township, New Jersey, which is located in Camden. During my sabbatical, I've been really into this type of work on how we should be going back into our school. I've been working with the Office of Professional Learning, and we've come up with a series of webinars, really diving deep into the lessons that we've learned during the last year, and what we can bring forward as we move back into an all in-class setting. So very happy, very looking forward for this conversation, and thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much. And now I'm going to introduce Dr. Scott Rocco, who is the superintendent of Hamilton Township School District and the immediate past president of the New Jersey Association of School Administrators. Did I get that right?
You got that right. Thanks, Yvonne. And hello, everybody. And thank you for inviting me to this panel, a great panel of educators that are here today to talk about how we can reopen our schools. As superintendent of Hamilton Township Public Schools in Mercer County, we're a large district with 24 schools, 11,500 students and 1,700 staff. So there's a lot of working pieces in getting us back into school and back into a rhythm. And I'm excited to talk about a little bit about the work we're doing here and about some of the work that's going on across the state. So thanks for the invitation.
Thank you so much. And now we're going to introduce Karen Bickert. I hope I said that properly. Hillsborough High School principal and immediate past president of NJEA.
Thank you, Yvonne. Yes, it's Karen Bingert, and it's funny, for 7 simple letters, it is rarely pronounced correctly. So you are in excellent company. So thank you very much for having me here today. I am the very proud principal of Hillsborough High School. I've been here since 1999 as a vice principal, and I was an English teacher before that. Lifelong commitment to education. I'm also the immediate past president of NJPSA, and I'm excited to share that I'll be the executive director starting on July 1st there. So some big transitions coming up in my life. I'm really excited about being a part of this panel. Scott and I go way back and have a shared commitment to education and just doing what's right by students. And they need it this year more than ever before. So thank you for including me today.
Thank you so much. And last but not least, Jennifer Tunnicliffe. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly. Great. Board of Education Vice President for West Orange School District and a former PTA officer. And that's how I met you, because I met you at New Jersey's PTA convention.
Yes, that's right. Thank you so much. And thank you for the invitation. I am delighted to be here with the other esteemed panelists, and I'm looking forward to the conversation. As Yvonne said, I'm the vice president for the West Orange Public School Board, and I was active in PTA for probably 10 years before my deciding to run for school board, holding leadership positions as president of an elementary school, a middle school, and our council of PTAs in West Orange. I have been working in higher ed for the last 10 or 15 years, and currently at Hackensack Meridian School of Medicine and in the Student Affairs Department. So I'm looking forward to discussing our plans and learning from all of you, and thanks for the invite again.
Awesome. So this is how this is going to work. I'm going to start by asking the first question. We actually have several questions, so let's try to get through as many as we can. So if you could take maybe 90 seconds to respond. If you need a little longer, I'm not going to time you, but just keep in mind that we have 8 questions and there are a lot of you, and we do want to hear from everybody. So we're going to start first with Angel, our Teacher of the Year. And this is the question. Everyone's priority right now is how the reopening of schools will look in the fall. We all know this is not a one-size-fits-all answer. How do you envision reopening of our schools for the 21-22 school year?
I don't think it's a secret. I think it's, every state and every county in this state has been talking about a focus on mental health and social emotional learning when we walk back into those doorways, making sure that our kids feel safe, that they feel that they can, discuss some of the issues, some of them very permanent issues and very personal issues that have affected them within the last year. Obviously, another factor is I think, we talked about the digital divide a bit in the beginning, but at this point, I think it's clear enough that, there is inequity when it comes to to our technology. And at this point, we should know that it's a severe issue, and we should make every concerted effort to get rid of this divide. I could argue that, access to internet and access to technology is as important, if not more important, than an effective curriculum. And then lastly, I think we should really look at this time as a point to reflect on how our education just wasn't working for some of our students, and where we can better ourselves and our schools so we can make schools appropriate and a learning a place for all of our students to feel included and to feel as they're a part of their own education here.
Thank you so much. Jennifer?
Thank you. I think our hope and aspiration is certainly that we will be back 5 full days a week within our school buildings. We hope there will be some flexibility for family members and students who do not feel comfortable coming back into the school for whatever reason because of the pandemic. And we're looking towards our governor and the CDC and the Department of Education to hopefully give us some new guidelines sooner rather than later. As you know, we've been working with the Road Back Plan, and we do need some updated guidelines pretty soon, and we hope to get those shortly so that we can really begin planning and making this a success for students. As Angel Santiago said, certainly the social emotional well-being of our students is going to be paramount, and how we're opening the buildings in terms of what our buildings and grounds team will need to do to keep everything safe and sanitary is also, at the front of our minds, and ensuring safety on our buses and cleanliness. So I think those are some of the things we're looking towards as we're planning for a reopening in September.
Thank you. Dr. Rocco?
Yeah, so what everybody's saying, I agree with, but I also see the reopening of schools for September starting now and carrying into the summer. There's a lot of work that we can do as school districts and educators to prepare our families, our students, and our staff for reopening. And this includes addressing academic needs, social emotional needs, and mental health needs. As we all prepare for the reestablishment of a positive connection between families and schools. And I think that's an important piece of this, is we need to establish that connection or reestablish that connection. And when we reopen in September, I envision schools to be more like we knew them. But there are going to be changes, and there's going to need to be changes. And we've learned a lot over this last year of what works and what doesn't work. I see schools working on academics, positive relationships in the early part of the year. We're going to focus on routines and procedures and school experiences. Most of all, though, and here's the important piece, I envision our schools in September to be filled with lots of good noise, laughter, fun, learning, excitement, and activities that we've all longed to hear and haven't heard them for over a year. So the reopening of school, to me, although there'll be lots of challenges, there will also be lots of positives. And I think if we work with parents and students and our faculty and staff, we'll get more of the positive than the challenges. And that's what I see for September.
Thank you so much. Marie?
Well, thanks, Scott, and thanks everybody for before me, because you basically said everything that I think we all know and we all feel. And I'll just say that I always start with where I think everybody started back in March a year ago, and that was when we really knew what the full plate was that we were looking at. We sat down, and the number one thing we started with was what our student needs. And from there, we progress. And it's going to be the same in the fall. And the safe and healthy working conditions for our schools is still going to be there. We need to follow CDC and medicine. We will continue to use that. But once we get back in person, because we know we've been doing it virtually, there are some opportunities here, right? There are opportunities to forge a closer relationship with parents, with community members, and when appropriate, with students, with the school board, with administrators, because we have almost $2 trillion coming from the federal government, coming out across 50 states, with a good portion coming here in New Jersey. And that money needs to be well targeted and well spent, well used, and that's going to need collaboration. And so I think that student needs and collaboration are my three favorite words.
Thank you so much. Karen?
Well, first echo Marie's sentiment that I think everybody who's gone before all of us is very comprehensively hitting upon the biggest issues. I mean, you know, we're all thinking about the things related to education. Will education look the same? Will we instruct the same? No, we won't. We've learned a whole array of brand new tools that our students and our staff can use, and frankly, will relish using when they're enhancing a typical classroom environment. When they're the entire classroom environment, I think everybody's pretty much done with the whole virtual experience. But you know, the tools that they've used will be excellent additions to moving education forward and targeting those students who maybe have been struggling in other more traditional classroom environments. So that will be certainly a very exciting thing to see. You know, we're focusing on SEL. We're focusing on making sure that our students are feeling comfortable reacclimating to a school building. The difference in the students that I've seen the first day they come back to school versus the fifth day they are back in school is entirely different. And, you know, I've done a lot of hand-holding this year, you know, figuratively, of course, but I've done a lot of hand-holding with students where I've said, you know, listen, please give it 1 week. And at the end of that week of you trying being in school in person, if you can't do it, then, you know, we're going to flip you back to virtual, and working the students through that type of anxiety that has arisen. But, you know, I think there are also going to be some different challenges that we need to face that are maybe a little even more targeted in the SEL realm. You know, the adjustment back to a full day of school for those schools that haven't been doing a full day, the social and situational anxiety that arises as students encounter people who maybe are not being as respectful of what makes them feel safe or comfortable. Stamina, not just the full day part of it, but also, you know, when you're working virtually or in a hybrid environment, when you're getting a little tuckered out, you just click and that camera goes off and you can stretch and you can get up and walk around, and you can't do those things the same way you can in a regular school environment. So that's going to be a challenge. And then, you know what, the other thing we have to consider is, you know, masks may still be a part of our lives in schools next year, but then eventually they're going to come off. And some kids are really going to just relish that freedom of being able to express themselves. And others are going to feel exposed and on, you know, just in the spotlight in a way that they have not in nearly 2 years of time at that point. And, you know, that's going to take a lot of TLC to help our students get through it. It's never going to be one size fits all, but I am more than confident that our schools, parents, teachers, boards of ed, and communities will be able to do this collaboratively. Good stuff to come.
Thank you. Oh, thank you. So the next question sort of is something that you've already talked about, which is, you know, the pandemic has exacerbated the need for wraparound services in our schools when they safely reopen. And I think all of you really touched on that, on the resources and services that the schools might need to prioritize, such as social emotional learning resources, mental health supports. But two other things that I haven't heard and I'd like to hear you speak about is nutrition and the loss and or growth of learning. So why don't we start with Marie?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, two equally important places that we also need to consider. During the pandemic, we were very proud of our members working collaboratively with our administrators and community members to get food into our students' homes who would normally depend on our school. But when we come back in some cases, there's going to be some kids that may not be able to come in person, and or there'll be some interruptions. And so nutrition has to remain at the top of the list. We know that there have been a lot of families who have lost their jobs, their positions. They were shut out for a while. We know that feeling at home when they got into food lines of which they had never been in before also transcended to their children who watched and were also started to be worried. And I think aside from actually providing, of course, the nutrition and the food that we're going to need, it's incumbent that we keep that in mind when we're talking about social emotional needs, not just of the students, but of their family members. And when we talk about wraparound service and collaboration, we're talking about further training all of our members who are not all counselors, they're not all school nurses or child study teams. There are aspects that we're going to have to face that we have not been trained for. But that training goes beyond us. It goes into the community and in with parents. And it's one of the things that we are very dedicated to do. And I'm just going to want to add one more thing. We're talking a lot still about academic and learning and what those needs are. And that money that's coming into from the federal government is going to be able to be used there. But let's not forget, equally as important are the arts, music, physical education, and for our older kids, those elective courses. For our special needs kids who go out into the community, they have an academic portion of the day, and then they usually go on a work site, many of them. That has been missed for well over a year. There's going to have to be some makeup time and some additional resources to provide that.
Thank you, Marie. Karen?
One of the things that I think has been most interesting on the nutritional side is, as Marie alluded to, the families in need have been a much bigger group than ever before. And one of the things that I think has been almost a side benefit of this is that with the way that food has been provided this past year and will be provided next year, I'm in a high school. Students at the high school level really will do just about anything they can not to participate in free and reduced lunch, okay, because they're concerned about a stigma that goes along with that. But this year, I think a lot of people have broken that stigma in a lot of ways, and that might broaden a little bit more access for people to more willingly sign up and participate in those programs, even after the all-encompassing program eventually goes away. So, nutrition, I think, is something that we'll be able to address pretty adeptly in the coming years in schools. And then, learning loss and learning growth. I had a conversation not too long ago with a colleague, and we talked about learning loss, and I commented on how heartbreaking I find it that the term learning loss is something that the kids are hearing all the time. Okay, it makes it sound like they are less than, or that they have not accomplished an enormous amount this year. They've learned how to do school in entirely different ways. They have learned how to overcome technical challenges and talk each other and their teachers through it. And, get on a Google Meet or a Zoom call and say, no, go to settings, hit this, hit that, go 3 levels in and click on the recording tab. And then you're going to find this little toggle switch for your microphone. And there you go. And they have learned a skill set that will serve them in so many ways in the future that we have to acknowledge that they have learned an enormous amount of information that will transcend high school, middle school, elementary school, and all the way into college and career. So, they may have learned things differently this past year, but we have to stop looking at this as a deficit for them. And frankly, Angel referred to this before, but we have students who have really struggled in this environment, but students who have really thrived in this environment. And this has targeted a whole different type of learning for them. So those students may come back next year stronger than they have ever been before. And what are we going to do to respond to their needs? What sort of enrichment are we going to build in? And frankly, there is not going to be a recipe that will work for everyone. Instead, we really have to consider those just in the nick of time interventions, either in support of or in advancement of the point that the student is at. I think it's pretty exciting looking at what next year is going to hold. And we're going to get them through it.
Thank you. Dr. Rocco?
So yesterday, we had food distribution for our district, and we served 1,500 students. And it takes me back for 14 months, going back to the beginning of the pandemic, when, as I believe it was Karen saying, food lines. We had lines of students at many buildings, and we were servicing communities for a basic need, food, at a very difficult time. And I won't forget that. And I consider that a wraparound service. And I consider that a service that we have to continue for the foreseeable future, among other things. But we need to also understand is during that time, we came together as a community, as a large family to help each other. And I think that's the steps we have to start thinking about moving forward with wraparound services. As a community, food service is obviously one. The fact that we have academic needs, and as Karen has said about kids hearing learning loss, I don't like that term, right? Because everybody has been in the same environment, and where we expect kids to be in a regular school year is not where anybody is. So let's work to get everybody where they need to be, and it will be individualized. And with that, when we talk about wraparound services, we also need to understand that this is not a quick fix. The solution is long-term. It's a multi-year approach to the work that we're going to do together as educators, as members of a community, working with the PTA and our parents. And a lot of this work is going to have to be done before school, after school, at opportune times that are good for families, right? Versus the standard time we do things. And then the only other thing that I would say to you is this: our students are going to need academic support, social, emotional support. There'll be mental health support that's needed. We can't just say to kids, hey, come and get more school. Put yourself back as a kid, K through 12, and your parent goes, hey, go get some more school, right? You would say no. So we've got to figure out ways that we can connect with our students, involve the arts, involve music, involve physical activity, bring kids to school for excitement, get them learning, get them involved, get them trusting our schools. And that's how we'll get our wraparound services to be successful, by engaging them in more than just saying, hey, go to school for tutoring. And that's some of the stuff we're working on here right now.
Great. Thank you. Jennifer?
Thank you. I really appreciate the discussion around learning loss, and I had attended a keynote presentation for the Ed Collaborative that one of our teachers was presenting at, and they had talked about, that it's not accurate and it's dangerous, in fact. And I would tend to agree, and I'm glad to hear other educators are on the same page. In terms of wraparound services, I mean, we've been pretty fortunate in West Orange, where we've been able to continue many of our skills and intervention programs, supplemental support programs. Even though we've been in hybrid, we kind of came back into the buildings in January and have been sort of doing a very moderate approach to reopening and combining. We're now at the point where we're combining cohorts, but we've had our ESL and specialized populations coming in for extra assistance throughout the days. And we use the afternoons for a lot of these. And we're trying to make sure that all of our students are getting the maximum time of on-site for those who require it most. So anybody in the special needs categories, students who are really not doing well from the virtual environment, especially some of our seniors, to make sure that they're graduating this year. We're trying to get all of those students back in. Plus, we're planning a more rigorous summer program this year. In addition to our ESY, we're also kind of going to expand that to make sure that we can bring in everyone from pre-K to 12 that needs extra support to do that over the summer. And like many of your districts, we have a very generous community that really supported. We created a food bank at our central office, and many people donated, and we prepared packages. Our lunch services team pulled together bags of food, and every child gets a big bag of food, whether you're on on the free and reduced lunch program or not, every student, we made sure every student gets it. And I think part of that was because of the stigma. We wanted to make sure that children were being fed and healthy. So anybody who comes into their school gets a bag. We also have pickup locations so parents can go and pick up lunches. And we make sure that it includes a lunch and a breakfast for the next day so that everybody is getting served. So I think we're hoping that the ESSER 3 or the American Rescue Act will be able to help us with some of these extended programs for the fall and be able to deliver some of the things that we're looking to do over the summer and continue that throughout the fall, and working with other partners like the Rutgers University Behavioral Health Center to bring in clinicians to assist with supporting students with mental health and social emotional issues. And this year we also started a program where we retained a bilingual parent liaison that we contracted through Rutgers University Behavioral Health as well. So those are a couple of the partnerships that we've created to help with these wraparound programs.
Thank you. Thank you. Angel?
Isn't it interesting that it took a pandemic for us to really talk about nutritional services for kids, which is, like Dr. Rocco said, it's a fundamental part of being a human being, and it's just interesting that we talk about this as a wraparound service and not a necessity. But I have to give credit where credit's due. I think our schools stepped up, most districts stepped up, and really provided those services for every student, not just those who are free and reduced lunch. And some of our panelists alluded to earlier that this type of service is going to have to be continued and on a larger scale because of the financial implications of the pandemic. When we talk about learning loss, which is a term I have to agree with everyone else, is something that I wish we can get rid of and really talk about the learning acceleration of our students. How do we get them to the next point? Not necessarily what they have lost, but giving the skills that they have gained and accelerating what they have gained to get them to the next point. Could you imagine 5 years ago a kindergartner being able to log onto a computer and checking their email? And if you couldn't, then I don't understand how that could be deemed as a loss. But some, I have to give credit to some of these districts who are starting the learning acceleration process, who have been looking for innovative ways in order to bring our students back to school, extending their ESY programs, offering sometimes even Saturday schools. I even was privy enough to have a discussion with a district who is offering online courses for their families and their students to do together, which I thought was amazing. Bringing that collaboration of home, that invitation to bring home into the school setting, I think that's essential when we talk about moving forward into next year. All ideas from now on are on the table, whether they come from parents or whether they come from educators or those who administrators who are at the head of our school districts. I think all ideas are on the table here. And I wanted to talk to something Dr. Rocco had said. You just can't give support and expect the kids to come. And because obviously more times than often, our students are going to not want to come to those summer programs. So you have to make it fun. You have to make it engaging. I've been talking to districts around the state who have been throwing out ideas for example, of having extended year programs around thematic project-based units, something that gets them in there, whether it be STEAM or a theatrical unit for ELA. Those things will get kids excited, our students excited to come back to school and really partake in those extra resources that will be available.
Thank you. So the next question, I'm going to ask you to try to keep to a minute because we do have a lot of questions and we only have an hour in its entirety. So this, I'm going to start with you, Marie, and this was alluded to already, but it's really important. So PTA strongly supports the parent's voice in any decision-making process that affects the education of their children. We also strongly oppose any American Rescue Plan, before that CARES Act money, right, being used to backfill district budgets. How do you value the parent voice in the decision-making process and how schools are reopened? And how will you support parents having a seat at the table when decisions are being made on how this money will be spent?
Yeah.
Also, if you could sort of touch also, I'm sorry, on the parents' responsibility as a partner in the education. So it's like an all-encompassing. Marie?
Yeah, 100% on board with everybody. Again, that's what the word collaboration means. Secretary of Education Cardona said last week on an interview that getting a plan put together by somebody and then sliding a paper across the table to everybody else, the stakeholders, and saying, you have any questions, is not collaboration. So the intent and the expectation of the President of the United States, the Secretary of Education, and Congress is that this money is to be spent and used for kids, and it's supposed to be very transparent and visible. And the only way that that's going to happen, Yvonne, is if we are at the table. Just as we bring everyone at the table for IEPs, as a special education teacher, 35 years, I didn't move unless I had parents and other stakeholders at that table making those decisions.
So much. Jennifer?
Thank you. We have a number of partnerships that are local within our community, including, or in addition to our PTAs. We have a very strong PTA group and a very active parent membership. We have a West Orange African Heritage organization that helps tutor, and I think they do that at 5 out of our 7 elementary schools. We have our Hispanic Foundation that also we've partnered with, as well as some local churches. And, we have our Council of PTAs where our board and our superintendent will meet with them quarterly, and we discuss issues that affect everyone in the district and how we can put our heads together to work together to solve some of those. And of course, a lot of those have been pandemic focused over the last year. And but we do enjoy a great relationship with many of our parents. We've also considered tapping into some of our high school students. We have a Mountaineers Mentor program, and we've got some terrific students who might be able to help with tutoring and other things. We have a Future Teachers Club as well in there at our high school. And we also have a newly reorganized Human Relations Commission that's also expressed an interest in partnering with our schools. So we're hoping that through these partnerships that throughout our community that we'll be able to address some of the needs that in the coming years.
Thank you. Angel?
And any monumental initiative that includes this type of resource should have every stakeholder at the table, including our parents, who quite frankly have been the best partners we've had in this last year. We relied on our parents a lot. So, I mean, it is, they have to be in this conversation. I think for our PTAs and our parents, this is a perfect time for our association, our parent teacher associations, to really reach out to all of their parents in their communities, regardless of diversity, regardless of language barriers, and to bring them to the table for the discussion as well. But another stakeholder that I don't want to negate, and I think they're probably quite possibly the most important stakeholder, is that we have to have our students in this discussion, the children of our parents, and I think it's because what we do, the initiatives that we take, will affect them greatly. They have to have a say in where we move the next year and beyond.
Thank you. Dr. Rocco?
Yeah, so I agree with everything that's been said so far. And I've said often, out of bad, the pandemic, good has to come. And so there's a lot of good that can come now that we've learned to adjust to what's happened in the pandemic. One of the things that we've learned over this time is that we need our parents to connect with us as school districts. And, the old saying about a village has never been truer than during the pandemic. And now we need to come together and take that to the next step. And there's a lot of work that has to be done moving forward. In Hamilton, just as Jennifer said, there are many different groups that we have that meet and talk. We have our Presidents Association of all of our presidents come together. Every month we meet and we talk. They now put the minutes out of those meetings. I actually have 3 teacher groups because we're so large. And we meet every other week talking about what we need to do moving forward. And many of those teachers are community members and parents in our community, which is important. But we need to go further, and we need to continue that movement so that we can connect all the groups together, including, as Angel said, our students. And so that is really an initiative all of us need to take moving forward, not only in the spending of funds that are being given to us, but also in the general operation as we move forward.
you. Karen?
Yeah, I concur with everything that everyone is saying, and I think I don't know that anybody realized just how important parent voice was, and the input of stakeholders throughout all of this. Student voice is critical, especially the kids are living this every day, so it's either working for them or it's not working for them. I think one of the unique challenges that we all faced this past year is that as we're looking for input from people, people were getting surveyed out. What do you want to do with this? How should we handle this? And, in some cases it was like, would somebody just make a decision and tell me what I need to do and we'll be good. But the feedback that we did get in those surveys was very impactful in the decisions that we were making in our districts. And I think that was very important, and that can't go away. Student voice, as I said, absolutely critical. But the other thing I think we all have to remember, coming from no matter what district we're in, no matter what agency we're working with, is that as we deal with the next step of responding to a worldwide pandemic, is that we always have to assume good intentions, that everything we do needs to be collaborative, honest, transparent, and understanding that parents have a very unique perspective about what is important to them. Students have a very unique perspective about what makes school engaging, interesting, and enjoyable for them. Administrators in districts have a very unique perspective in what they need to do in addition to what they want to do. And so going forward from here, always assuming good intentions, always knowing that we are here just to give our kids, our students, the best experience we can. As long as we continue to collaborate that way, I think we're going to be just fine. And it's going to be pretty exciting.
Thank you so much. Okay, the next question, and I need to keep you to a minute because we're never going to get through these questions, but all of you are amazing, all these great ideas and your beliefs. Okay, so unfortunately, many students were just not able to learn remotely. Some never even logged on during the pandemic, and the effects for these students may be tremendous. What academic support do our students need to succeed during the 21-22 school year? We're going to start with you, Jennifer. 1 minute.
Sure. Thank you. We're in the process of really doing some assessments and looking at, where each individual student is and what we will need to do to support them in the coming year, or whether it's, bringing them into the expanded summer program. So we're in the process of doing kind of an assessment right now for where each student is and which ones will need some help.
Thank you. Karen?
Similar idea. We have to, in the moment, assess our students, whether it's formally, informally, formatively in the classroom, and then start to make decisions based on that. Each student is going to hit an accelerated point at a unique point, and then each student is going to hit a bump or a wall at a different point. And we have to have in the moment responsiveness to whatever that student needs, whenever that student needs it. And I think that's probably going to be the most challenging thing next year because there's no program that fits that. So it's constant responsiveness, flexibility, reactivity, but proactivity.
Thank you. Dr. Rocco?
Yeah, add to that, it has to be individualized. So you can't have this global program for everybody. It's not going to meet that need. And while we're focusing on the academics, just as I think Karen said earlier, in one of the answers is we also have to work on some of the things that will impact kids' learning. So our kids on the screen have been used to shutting the screen down and going and get a snack. So routines and procedures and activities that focus on learning and get them refocused are going to be as important as focusing on the learning itself. But that has to be individualized as we move forward.
Thank you. Angel?
I have to echo everyone's sentiment. The expansion of these programs, not just to targeted populations, but to as many populations as we can. I think that is something that is going to be vital, especially during summer. The Saturday programs that I alluded to earlier, any innovative tutoring program that comes to the table. And this is the type of material that we should be sharing amongst districts, amongst professionals to see what is working and what other districts can do as well to advance this learning acceleration.
Marie?
I also agree. I'll just say that working in special education and regular education, my students always came into me. I never saw everybody at the same exact standard anyway. That is what I'm trained to do. And it is going to have to be done individually, just as we have done. But I'm also going to say that I believe that intensive tutoring in some cases is going to be just enough of the bridge to get us to where we go, where we need to be, right? And working collaboratively with my fellow educators and administrators and parents, we can ascertain the essential pieces of information that my kids would need in order to move into the next concept.
Thank you. Okay, so the next question, some of you sort of touched on, but we'll elaborate. Again, if you can make it 60 seconds or less, that would be great. Many students did not receive any instruction beyond the core subjects when the pandemic hit. What non-academic supports do our students need to successfully transition back into in-person learning? We'll start with you, Dr. Rocco.
I'll start with one item. They have to feel comfortable coming back into the building. I think that's an important piece of this. Before they can learn, they have to feel comfortable. And that's why, as I said early on, the planning and the implementation for September starts now. It starts now over the next 4 months to get ready for September. And so doing activities, events, different experiences for kids, why it's important for our kids to be back in school now, whether that's a half day or a full day, is to get them used to getting back in that rhythm and get them comfortable with what happens in school. So that's the first step of this as we move forward.
Thank you. Marie?
Yeah, I agree also, of course, with Scott. And Karen mentioned it earlier. There are going to be some kids that are going to be running back into our buildings, and then others are not going to be comfortable. We have some kids that they're in their second year of school and they haven't been in school at all. So we are really going to need to focus in on supporting them as they move forward, for sure.
Thank you. Angel?
Yeah, I believe that it starts with establishing like a great team between the teacher, the family, counselors, administration, to make sure that our parents understand all the supports that are offered to their students. I think that the invitation to home has to be the responsibility of the school, and because some of our families have experienced financial trauma and personal loss. So our families, our students, they need to feel safe, they need to feel connected, and then ultimately engage as we move forward.
Thank you. Karen?
And I think we have to consider that when the pandemic hit, it was really prioritize and survive. And then this year it was, what do we need to do to get those cross-cutting skills really firmly in place for the students so that, literacy, math could transcend all of the subject areas. But moving ahead, as has already been referenced, we need to focus on what students love. I'm a high school principal. Kids, I shouldn't say this, okay, but you can quote me. Kids don't look back on high school and think, oh, gee, that one, whatever class it was just, incredible. They don't think about every moment of every class. But 20 years from now, 30 years from now, 40 years from now, they will talk about that game, that dance, that band competition, that performance, that extra thing above and beyond, or that elective course that sparked something in them that became the trajectory of their lives. That's what we need to focus on. That's what connects students to their schools, and that's what makes them far more comfortable coming back in where they get to learn to become themselves.
Thank you. Jennifer?
Sure. I think we've been really fortunate in West Orange, and I'm really proud of the work that we did because we were able to offer related arts courses within our virtual and our hybrid model. And I think it's a real testament to our educators and how creative they were in being able to deliver choral programs and music programs and piano labs and, gym classes. And, I had my son unrolling the yoga mat in my living room and doing doing his gym class virtually. So there were a lot of really creative, wonderful things that our teachers did to kind of make these come together and produce, fantastic choral concerts. We're fortunate in our town to have a outdoor theater where our spring musical, they did a musical review instead of, a set show, because it allowed students to do individual things. And it was wonderful. It was a couple weeks ago and it was outside. And so I think it's a real testament to the collaboration and the creativity that our faculty members had to kind of be able to deliver all of these. And we've had athletic programs running since probably late last summer. So we've been able to keep a lot of those things that, as Karen said, the students remember. And, we were proud to be able to do that for our kids during this time that's been so disruptive for so many of our families.
Thank you. Okay, this is the last question, and I'm going to ask you again to try to keep it to a minute. PTA believes forming and working with coalitions and partners in education builds strong schools. What can individuals in your respective fields do to support schools, educators, and parents during the upcoming school year 21-22? We'll start with you, Angel.
In my respected field, which includes teachers, as we approach the summer, first and foremost, I think we should all take a collective sigh of relief because we've worked harder than we've ever worked before, and then after really understand what is on the horizon and how we need to be on top of this learning acceleration process. So I think building networks of learning communities with people that have extensive knowledge in social emotional learning and counseling and those areas that we aren't necessarily experts in, to seek out those professional development opportunities. I think is something that we should pursue. And then lastly, sending out emails and letters to our parents and our families, really informing them of all the learning acceleration programs that our schools offer, any of the resources that they offer, and really extending that hand, that hand of partnership and invitation to be part of the conversation when we return to school.
Thank you. Karen?
I think a lot of this is going to come down to just sharing best practices. Panels like this, we all pick up a little bit of something and bring it back, and it's helpful to hear and talk with other people and learn what works for them, what's not working for them, and the whys, because you may be able to apply that in your own situation. I already mentioned the idea of assuming good intentions. And I think that's very important as well. We have to continue that level of collaboration. I also think one of the things that we have to consider is learning how to say yes instead of no. There are always many, many reasons, especially in an institution, and a school system is an institution, when there can be institutional thinking that creates boundaries, and we are going to have to break through those boundaries now. So out of the box thinking doesn't come with saying yes to everything. Out of the box, that might have been contradictory. Out of the box thinking is when you really do push beyond those limits, and you do learn to say yes, and you are willing and able to kind of take a deep breath and say, okay, let's try it. Let's see where it goes, because frankly, this is what you need, and I'm going to give you what you need.
Marie?
Yeah, thank you. I'm very proud to say that when we hit the pandemic midway through the year, and again, just recently, when we saw what we were going to need to do to come forward, we reached out to our partner groups, our Superintendents Association, our principal supervisors, obviously PTA, school boards, and many more, right? NAACP, ELC, legislators, the governor's office, the DOE, and we actually formed a statewide coalition back in the fall. We produced a paper that outlined what the priorities are of our student needs are. We've brought them together again about a week ago to start to look at this federal money, and we're modeling that collaboration for all of us and for our members as we go down. But also our organization, I've been very proud to say that we reached out right from the beginning. We put a website up where there were activities and resources for not just kids, but for their parents, right? for community members to come together. We had our former teacher of the year, Kim Dickstein Hughes, worked with the DOE, principal supervisors, superintendents, and school boards to produce a TV program last year called Learning Live, where some of those yoga mats were out because they were modeling some of those activities there. And we have a program that is our members' dues monies that we call Pride and Fast programs, where locals report back, or they apply for grants that then take activities and communications back to the communities, to the parents, and provide resources there. We are committed in all of those areas and in, like I said, the training of not just our members, but the parents as we move forward. I'm just going to say one last thing. I heard a colleague from another state last week. We were all, again, networking and picking each other's brains. And he said something that just resonated with me. He said, we've always been known in our school communities as learning communities. He said, what we need now to be are healing communities.
Thank you for sharing that. Dr. Rocco?
Partnerships and coalitions have gotten us to this point in the pandemic. And groups have joined together that have never joined together. Groups have worked more efficiently than they ever have in the past. And how we get out of this is by maintaining and growing those coalitions and those groups and those partnerships. And we need to look at the local, county, and state level for the resources to help all of us recover or heal, as Maria said, heal from this process. So many of us have come together, whether it's been an unofficial coalition of phone calls and text messages working together, or an official meeting coming together. Those things have to continue. There are going to be many more unanswered questions moving forward as we start doing things for the first time in our recovery mode. And so if we're open to joining together, to working together, to forming coalitions for the betterment of our students, our staff, our school districts, and our community, we will be successful. We've proven to this point we can be successful. Now will be even more work ahead. So I think there's an importance there, and our parents are key to this as we move forward.
Thank you. Jennifer?
Thank you. And Marie, just thank you for that. A healing, communities is beautiful. I'm going to take that back because I think we all need some healing at this point. And I think, we certainly could solicit more parental input on many of our decisions. And I think we're taking a few action steps towards that now. We're working to establish school action teams that will be based at each school, so that we'll have sort of a systematic process for soliciting input and getting feedback that'll give us a broader representation. And we'll ask our building administrators to kind of select that with diversity in mind. And, we've done a lot of surveys over the last year. So I think, I can totally relate to the comment about being surveyed out. And I think the other thing our board is planning to do is go and attend PTA meetings to just listen and be there. If they have questions, we will respond, but I think it's more there to hear what's going on, to hear the concerns, to hear what's working, what's not at the school level, and what's happening with our parents. And that's always been really helpful. The other thing that we did a lot of this year, we did these large town halls. We had a really successful one where we brought in medical experts when we were talking about, why we couldn't go back in, and had a panel that was across hospital networks and various doctors, including our own district physician. And I think that was really helpful. We did another one for budget, and we're preparing another one for goals. So we really are kind of coming in with a mindset of how do we solicit this input from our community, so that we are making that our decisions, that our goals are focused on not only student achievement, but also, how do we do that within the construct of what the community is willing to bear. So
Thank you. And thank you all for all of your input. And one thing that I think we can take away today is the importance of collaboration into all levels of education, especially parents and educators being at the table, making decisions together. And at National PTA, we just sent out a guiding document on the American Rescue Plan. We took that dense document and we simplified it, and we are giving our parents an opportunity to really have a seat at the table, giving them guidance, making it simpler for them to sort of get involved so that they can have a voice in how the money's being spent. Because to me and to PTA, it's so important, because that money is a lot of money. As you know, I think Marie, you alluded to that. So we had the CARES Act money, and now we have this American Rescue Plan money, which affects every part of education. So we really want our PTA members to be involved. And that's how you, as a member of PTA, can take action, is to have a seat at the table. So again, thank you so much for being with us today. I think it was amazing information. I know I even learned something. It was a great evening. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Yvonne Johnson, the National PTA Vice President of Advocacy, for being the moderator of that great panel. Thank you to the panelists. The information was excellent. That was taped about 2 weeks ago, so some of the information is not exactly up to date, but please check the PTA website and emails that will be going out for the updated information.